Okay, so our topic today is oxytocin and the science of us versus them. Um, I think in the description, the last line said that one of the functions of oxytocin is to make us more us and them more them. And Diane, you had pointed out in a post that oxytocin actually has multi functions that it does. It's actually quite complicated, more than just the love hormone or the attachment hormone that we often think about it as. So, if Diane, if you have some background in this, if you're willing, I'll put you on the spot and let you go
Well,
ahead
I
and,
can ad lib a little bit.
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Um, the reason I got interested in the first place was, or I got to know something about it, is because I was participating in a conference about early childhood and peace. And Sue Carter was at the same uh, conference. And Sue Carter is the person who did all this research with the voles, showing that voles that were given oxytocin, well, eventually through experimentation, they discovered that they could make normally polygamous or you know what's the proper word? Can't think of it.
Non-monogamous.
Non-monogamous voles, and they're little sort of mouse-like creatures. Uh, they would become monogamous. They would make pair bonds for life if they had oxytocin administered to them, or there were two different kinds of voles. One kind had oxytocin and they were monogamous, and the other kind was non-monogamous and didn't secrete oxytocin when they were mating. So using that, they discovered that they could do it by, artificially imposing this chemical on these little animals. So they could turn them into lifelong bonding creatures. So there was a whole literature that developed about oxytocin, the love hormone. And not only that, I'm sure there are TED Talks and so on and so forth. It was a big deal about 10 years, 10, 15 years ago. And then there was a guy in Holland, Karsten, somebody, who did some experiments and showed that while giving oxytocin to people who are in a group, if you bring a group together, you give them oxytocin, they're more bonded to each other. They're more friendly and nice to each other. But if you put them into economic games where these people who are bonded to each other are interacting with people who are not in the group, they are more discriminating against the other group. So I think that must be part of the basis of what Alan was suggesting there.
Mhm.
And then I did look at the uh, film that he or you or somebody
No,
posted.
he posted it. It was a little talk by Sapolsky.
Yeah, and this guy had gone through the same sort of evolution in his thinking from seeing it as a love kind of thing to something that strengthened bonds. But when you strengthen bonds, then you know you strengthen the distinction between the partner or the group and other groups. So I guess that's basically what Alan was suggesting.
That's a pretty good ad lib, Diane.
No, thanks.
So I have a question. So when I when I first knew anything about oxytocin, I thought of it as an attachment hormone between a mother and baby. Um,
That's of course the original
right.
research was on that.
rather than an attachment either to a romantic or sexual partner or even to a larger group. So is that part of what you meant in your post when you talked about it performs multifunction? Because in the mother-child bond, does that really accentuate a us versus them in some way, as well as the attachment between the mother and child? Does
Well,
that make sense what I'm asking?
we don't really know I don't really know anyway, what it does to babies.
Mm-hmm.
It does help mothers feel more attached to their babies.
Mm-hmm.
But not only that, it also helps them let down their milk when the baby wants to nurse. It helps them go into labor
Yeah.
before they've even given birth. It's so that's what I meant by multifunctional. I mean,
Yeah.
it's involved in many, many biological processes,
Well, and
but
I
it
also
also has
I think I've also read that after sexual intercourse that oxytocin is released in males at least, that increases a sense of attachment to your sexual partner.
yeah, that's why it works with voles.
Oh, I see. Okay. It's very nice if you scramble the letters in that animal's name, you can come up with love, which is appropriate.
Exactly. Well, it does have something to do with feelings of love.
Hmm.
It also has something to do with feelings of, group boundaries.
Hmm.
And it also has to do with a lot of different physiological processes. I've forgotten now. I had actually read these things, but there's a bunch of things it does.
Is
Uh,
it related to awe?
it's
Say
pardon?
say say that again, Rob.
Is it related to awe?
AWE or
We
um,
had a talk on
Ah,
awe.
maybe. Who knows?
yeah, is when you're staring up and looking at the heavens or the northern lights or the Grand Canyon, is oxytocin released? I
Hmm.
I don't I
Yeah.
don't know.
Would be.
Loving the universe, maybe.
Hmm. Hmm.
I
Personally, I
think
love the universe.
I think awe has a slight element of fear in it.
Hmm.
Can.
Yes, well, the essence of, not to change the topic, but the essence of awe, as I understand it, is something you experience in the face of something that is immense. That could be physically immense, but you can feel awe about an idea if it's a big idea. Just so, yeah, there's maybe an element of fear when you realize how small you are compared to whatever it is you're in awe of. But that's a good question, Rob. I don't know if oxytocin would be released in that experience. Yeah. But clearly the central point here is that it has an upside and well, we could look at it as a downside if I suppose we need to be a little bit more nuanced in when we talk about the fact that it accentuates an us versus them because the reason that exists is that that's been an adaptive feature for our species is to have a sense of us versus them. It has a
Which,
lot
of
of,
course,
yeah.
that in itself has an upside and a downside.
Yes, that's exactly where I was heading in that. I think nowadays when we talk about us versus them, we immediately just jump to talking about the downside of that, which is more prominent in the news in contemporary society. But it's there because has or had an upside, unless it's an example now of evolutionary mismatch and is no longer has an upside in the modern environment. I don't know. But we're drifting off topic a little bit. Yeah, Rob.
I just put a link in the chat to awe and spirituality
Okay.
and oxytocin.
Oh, and is it released when is that what is that
Well,
what?
I just read this headline and it looks like it is, yeah.
Okay.
But I won't guarantee it because I didn't read it.
Okay. Other folks' thoughts on this topic?
The biology of awe, oxytocin.
Ah, well, that headline certainly suggests that it's playing a role then, for sure. Yeah, very interesting. Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
It's maybe it's too obvious for anybody to want to talk about, but this is exactly the paradox of multiple levels of selection, multi-level selection,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? Because we're talking about cooperation in group, competition between groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem in our larger world today, I think, is that uh, we feel the need for groups to cooperate. And the only way to really make that happen is to enlarge the definition of who the group is.
Mm-hmm.
But then that breaks down very easily
Mm-hmm.
because of our tendency to look for differences.
Drilling down, do we know what part of the brain oxytocin actually has an effect on? Is it the limbic system, or do we know the neurology of it? I don't recall that being in the resources, and I don't know what it affects. The attachment system is located where? Is that limbic, or does anybody know? Okay.
I don't know. I've read Sapolsky's book Determined, and it's somewhere in there. I can't remember.
I've read part of that book. I didn't come to that section. I know Zafir, I know you've read that book as well.
What if I couldn't catch it?
Well, Zafir I know he's read Determined as well by Sapolsky, which is a book about free will or the lack thereof.
Yeah, I actually can't recall oxytocin. It's funny because it's a neurotransmitter that I really don't come across it very often. It's always dopamine or serotonin or even GABA that comes up over and over again. And oxytocin mustn't be currently trending because it's not one that I actually come across, or maybe it doesn't line up close enough with my interests. But it might be a really interesting angle because of when I visit groups, sometimes they're going through the motions and it feels very cold. And sometimes you can see that they genuinely actually care and love each other. And it's those groups that in my less rational moments that I want to be a member of, versus the ones who are just going through the rituals and doing things that they're told. You can almost sense it when you walk into the room that these people really love and care about each other. So it'd be interesting to see if there was some way of measuring that. You wouldn't mind peeing into this cup or giving you a blood sample.
So, Chris, can you say a little bit more about what Sapolsky said about it that you recall from that book?
Um,
Not,
no, I
not to
can't.
put you
I'm
on
not
the
very good.
spot,
I'm
but
not good on details. Yeah, on that. I'd have to look back on it and double check. But um, no, I think maybe I'm mixing it up with the video and other videos that Sapolsky's done. He has done. I've looked on YouTube and he's done videos relating.
Yes.
And he's done a whole video about oxytocin. It may or may not be indetermined.
okay,
Because, as you say, rightly, determined is mostly about free will and the proving or his attempt to prove that free will doesn't exist.
right.
But he has done a lot of lectures. He puts lots of his lectures online, and he's done one all about oxytocin. Yeah.
Okay.
I seem to recall. I don't know. Again, it's very difficult when you're operating from memory to know what's reliable and what I'm confabulating. But I seem to recall a big deal a few years being made of dogs, like staring into the eye of your dog, releasing oxytocin in both you and the dog, and that ability to bond across species. But yeah, like I say, I'm just confabulating. I don't know to what degree or how accurate that is.
That's interesting. I mean, given the long domestication and relationships that our species have had, particularly with dogs, you would think that probably evolution has shaped us to have to release oxytocin
Yeah.
when we're with dogs. I mean, that would make sense, and
Oh,
I assume vice versa. Yeah, not cats though. I don't have any oxytocin for cats. I'm sorry, I just can't get attached.
Horrible, cold, unfeeling animals.
I do. I like them.
They don't care
I
about you
know, I
either.
have people in my family that have oxytocin release for cats, but I don't personally understand it because I don't think they have any oxytocin release for me, is my sense. But
Oh,
we're
well,
digressing.
Yeah, that's actually it's kind of interesting though, in terms of um, so I do recall that oxytocin's released. There's also one of the nicknames for it was the cuddle hormone that
Hmm.
actually touch could release it, like stroking and hugging could release it.
Hmm.
So when a cat's purring and you're stroking a cat, I don't know, they're horrible, duplicitous animals. I'm sure they're just manipulating you, but they could be releasing oxytocin.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well,
Chris,
didn't
you were
humans
about Chris was
co-evolve?
wait. How about Kathleen and then Chris? Go ahead, Kathleen.
yeah.
Didn't humans co-evolve with dogs? I mean, cats domestication is more recent, but I read somewhere that we actually co-evolved with dogs.
My
I
understanding is
doubt
that
it.
No?
dogs domesticated themselves, that they kind of hung around garbage pits near human settlements, and
Mm.
gradually it was adapted for them to lose their fear of humans. I remember reading something about the process of dog domestication. They weren't they really domesticated themselves to hang around us rather than us intentionally domesticating, wolves or something.
Oh,
I think.
I've read the same thing about cats.
But I
Okay.
also read that dogs are much more duplicitous than we think.
That's stands to reason, probably. Yes. Yeah. Chris, you were going to say something a moment ago.
Um, yeah, getting back to the sort of the them and us angle, which
Hmm.
I guess was part of the reason for the discussion we started, was that the one. I mean, it's very coincidental. It's very hard not to take on your own personal experiences in your life and apply these things. And of course, it has only so much value. But it has some value. And I think when I've got a dog, and if I'm petting the dog and stroking the dog, she is more aggressive to my other dogs immediately after that.
That's
So it's
fascinating.
almost as if this is an oxytocin release, and he goes, yeah, I've got an attachment here. This is all good. I'm going to get food and stuff, and that's all good. But then the rest of you can get lost. Why? And she goes nasty at the other dogs.
He's
So I mean,
mine.
that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily apply to all the dogs, but it certainly applies to her. And that idea of attachment forming, and therefore a almost antipathy, that's the wrong word, antipathy. I think
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Antipathy. Sure.
For the other dog, yeah, it emerges, and you can see. I think we were talking earlier about mother and child, and you were talking about when a mother nurses her child, or a father with a child, a young child. They're very protective, and that's what we mean by protective, isn't it? The
Yeah.
protection, the protection goes up, and you can see why on an evolutionary timescale that might be the case. If you've got, I read somewhere in some of the literature that was put forward about this that for a lot of mammals, infanticide is a real risk. So if a mother has she has some young, then she's most at risk of losing her offspring by another male, perhaps. Depends on the species, it all varies, but
Hmm.
some species, the males will come in and kill the young just to
Hmm.
get her to be back on the season again, so that
Yes.
he can then pass on his genes. And
Yeah.
so that sort of fear of a very strong attachment and very strong defensiveness, I kind of get as a model. It seems to make sense to me as a model for why there is this us and them, or at least one of the reasons why there is us and them.
And as you were describing the dogs, what popped into my mind was that the other dogs were the first dog that you were petting. If you want to anthropomorphize his or her reaction, they were jealous of the other dogs, or vice
Yeah,
versa. So that it makes me wonder about, the role that oxytocin may play in human jealousy as well,
Yes.
to the
Yes.
degree that jealousy happens when you're attached to something, and then you don't want that person you're attached to, you don't want to stray.
Yeah.
Although, we that one might be jealousy is a interesting evolutionary psych topic. I don't think we've ever actually done examine lives on jealousy. That might be an interesting topic. David Buss has obviously written a whole book on it.
Definitely.
Yeah, but jealousy is very different for men than women, and yet they both have oxytocin released. So it's more complicated than simply some effect of
Mhm.
that chemical. Yeah, Saphir, I saw your hand up a moment ago, and then you took it down. I didn't know if that was.
Yeah, Chris covered it pretty well. The only one other thing probably to add was the thought of who would you risk your life for? There's very few people. You could rationalize it, and you could think carefully about it. But when the situation comes, when dangerous situations come, who would you actually risk your life for? And my wife's is a no-brainer for me. And that I don't know to which degree that is actually um, hormones and neurochemicals going on versus other forms of attachment. But yeah, the other, I don't have children, but I've heard the same thing about children that they would gladly trade their life for their children, and I'm wondering that some degree of that isn't just the cold rationality of survival of your offspring versus hormonal
Right.
inputs.
You would die for your child because your child's you, genetically, or at least half you.
Yeah, that's the usual argument, but then
Yeah.
maybe there's other neurochemistry going on in the background that's less rational.
Yeah, I was saw the video recently of the shooting at Bondi Beach, is in Australia, and there was a one gentleman that attacked the shooter or one of the shooters. You may have seen that
Mhm.
video as well, um, and I think he was shot while he did that, but he probably saved quite a few lives by taking one of the shooters down at risk to his own life. Um, so that's interesting. What is it with individuals you saw that video with hundreds of people running the other way, right? And this one man running towards the shooter. And we can think of other examples of that. Um, to the degree that, I mean, that was a Jewish celebration, so there was probably some oxytocin in that crowd, right? That was a group of us, and they felt some attachment. And I assume that man was part of that celebration. I don't know. It's an interesting.
He
Uh,
was not Jewish.
He was, yeah, he was a Muslim.
He's a
Uh,
Palestinian, isn't he? Yeah.
I
No,
didn't.
Syrian.
I,
Syrian, yeah.
okay, I didn't know that.
Mm.
Yeah. Am I right though? It was a Jewish celebration
It
of
was
some.
you're right.
Yes.
I think he said Jewish celebration. Yeah, he didn't say he was Jewish. No.
Okay, well, that makes it even more fascinating in some ways.
Yeah.
Um, hmm,
I think it's interesting talking about, we're focusing upon oxytocin as if there's, I think, as if there's this one chemical that, and obviously it is attractive to us because it's kind of the love hormone, and because we attach such importance to these feelings that we're associating with this hormone. But in social animals, so it's only, am I right in saying it's only vertebrates that have oxytocin? In fact, only mammals, I think I read. Only mammals, I think. And if that's the case, then, I live in a farm in the UK where there's loads of corvids, loads of crows, and I'm sure you all have crows around you of one species or another.
mhm.
And they are incredibly social and incredibly bright,
Yes.
and they live in groups. So that means that the job of oxytocin, if I'm right, that birds don't have, or there's not in the same way as humans, as I understand it,
Mhm.
then something else is going on there. There's some other hormone doing the same sort of job to allow them to coexist and so on. And I guess and then there's octopus, which are also hugely intelligent, and many of the cephalopods, and they're not social. So it's kind of very I slightly struggle with just focusing upon one chemical. That's what I'm
Yes.
getting
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Oxytocin, I just searched for it. Apparently only produced in mammals, but birds produce a related hormone called mesotocin, which functions like oxytocin. So they don't have oxytocin, but there's another chemical that's doing something similar.
Yeah.
And
for peer bonding in particular.
Maybe a similar
Yeah.
chemical structure too, in some fashion.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if switching to again mother-child attachment. I wonder, does anyone know if when there's a failure of attachment between a mother and child, is that in any way related to, low oxytocin release?
Research.
Yeah, I'm just
I think it would be terribly hard to research that.
Yeah.
Because oxytocin, love relationships, attachment relationships extend over
Mm-hmm. Oh, you froze, Diane.
fairly long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But oxytocin comes and goes. It may have effects.
Yeah.
My understanding is that oxytocin is highly state specific, and it's quite short lived. So the effects are infrequent and short lived.
Okay.
Which does call into question, I guess, conclusions about sort of broad effects on social things. But the state specific, after sex, for instance, or some event, there's a hormone released, but I don't think you can ingest it. I did look to see if I could buy some, but I couldn't. So anyway, but it's just state specific, I guess.
I wonder if in the period of infatuation in a love relationship, which lasts typically, I think, what does the research say? It usually lasts about 7 months or so before it either fades away completely or changes into attachment, but not infatuation, which is that sort of, intense preoccupation. All you can think about is the other person. You want to be with the other person night and day. I wonder if in that state, oxytocin release is a little bit more chronic or frequent. I don't know. Yeah, or we may be putting
Something's going on, isn't it?
too much. Yeah, something's going on. We may be putting too much explanatory weight on one small neurotransmitter. But and isn't oxytocin released during breastfeeding too? Am I right about that?
I think so.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So
I think those sorts of ideas of that in common description, in common storytelling relating to love, which humans are obsessed with it. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm very fortunate to have been in love myself, and it's an absolutely wonderful thing. I've been through that, and anybody else who has knows what I mean. But you look at films. How nearly all films have got an aspect of love interest in there, and it's sewn into almost every book and every well, not every book, but it's the mainstay, isn't it? It's the bread and butter of most storytelling. And yet we have very little understanding, what the majority of people, or I certainly didn't until I read some of this stuff about the biology of this. And it's almost like perhaps I'm straying off topic here, but just very quickly to finish my point, which is that you kind of feel that that if you do talk about it, you're in some way spoiling that. You're reducing it to a chemical. You're kind of making it into something less wonderful than it is, or you're spoiling it in some way. So we've got a funny relationship with it. I just think it's really good to talk about it. That's why I'm here today. I think it's really important to talk about it and and see where we go with it.
My answer to that, and I think Richard Dawkins has made this point is, you can explain the optics and chemistry of a rainbow, but it doesn't make it look less beautiful or awe-inspiring when you look at it. So I know that she recently died, but Rutgers anthropologist Helen Fisher has written quite a lot on the science of romantic attachment and has some talks on YouTube that are pretty good.
Okay. What's
Yeah.
the name again?
Helen Fisher. I think it's just FIS. I don't know if there's a C in there or not, but it's Helen Fisher. She was at Rutgers University in New Jersey.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to the pros and cons of this, let's shift and talk a little bit more about the con, which is the idea that it increases what term should we use? One's hostility towards an out group, or what's the best way to phrase it, Diane, do you think?
Defensiveness?
Say that again, Chris.
Defensiveness, is that part of it?
Is it, well, I guess, is it defensiveness or offensiveness? Does it make you
I
more
feel like,
likely to just
yeah.
be defensive, or does it make you more likely to take offensive steps to,
Mm,
yeah.
mm.
Do the benefits of it outweigh the the downsides? Probably not a moral math that we're capable of doing.
Yeah, of course, those sorts of questions always depend on context. What's adaptive in one situation is a evolutionary mismatch in a different situation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole naturalistic fallacy point of view as well. That
Yes.
we might find it is natural to, well, it's natural for these hormones to emerge in us, sometimes without us having any conscious control over it or even realization that it's happening. But that doesn't mean that's any guidance for us, really, doesn't it? We're at the point where we can actually think, well, okay, what do we think is our moral reasoning is? I'm going to say beyond, that's the wrong word, but there's a way of thinking about it that doesn't, which just doesn't rely on it having to be natural.
Mm-hmm.
We could come up with views that might have not much to do with it being evolved, why it might have arisen, if you like, in the first place. What do we do about it, if you like? That's the difference.
Yeah, I always argue that if you want to make human beings more peaceful and more cooperative, you better know what you're up against,
Yes.
right? Rob?
I just want to question the us versus them hypothesis here.
Okay.
It seems to me that from what I know of oxytocin, it is generally positive.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it also induce hostility to an outgroup? I don't see that. Even if there's hostility towards the group, the oxytocin is reinforcing positive feelings about your own group, not, as far as I know, inducing hostility towards another group.
Diane?
Well, I was gonna say then what Rob actually said. But if you read, I finally remembered his name, Carsten Stedrew, read his studies. What it does do is make the distinction between your group and the other group. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not because of oxytocin. Whatever makes us so interested in in-group cooperation. And
Is Diane just breaking up for me, or is she breaking up?
It's broken up for me too.
Okay.
Reinforces that.
While we wait for her to unfreeze,
but oxytocin.
I'm kind of wondering as we talk about this, if the way to think about what we're calling the downside of this is that it's more a byproduct rather than a direct chemical effect. So that let's think about the role of that oxytocin may play in religion, in religious groups. So that if I'm part of a religious community, um, um, and I feel that my fellow adherents care about me, and I care about them, as Zafir was talking about earlier, there's going to be some oxytocin release. And then there's another group over here that has a different religion. And it maybe is not so much that oxytocin directly also makes me hostile to them, but as a result of the increased attachment and identification with the group I'm in, somehow a byproduct of that or a natural consequence of that, not a chemical consequence, but a result of that increased attachment of the in-group is naturally going to mean some wariness and perhaps even hostility towards a group that has a different. Does that make sense the way I'm outlining it? Rob? Yeah. Go ahead, Zafir.
Is there from the people who are in this meeting right now in this little group, are there any Jehovah Witnesses or Seventh-day Adventists? No? Okay, good. So I'm not going to offend anybody. So I've visited both groups and I've had a bit to do with both groups. Superficially, they look very similar. They dress very sharp. They've got a dress code. There's a lot of rituals. I think their beliefs are probably equally as unlikely to be true. The Jehovah's Witnesses are very structured in the way they meet, and they come across as friendly and they're very pleasant. But it always leaves me with the impression that it's an act. And one of the reasons I see this is I once went to a meeting. I was invited along, and it was the son of the person who was actually leading the group. It was like the leadership role of that church. It was his son who was giving the little talk that day, and I thought he did a pretty good job. But they avoided eye contact with each other, and there was no patting on the back or no acknowledgement of pride or anything like that. You go to a Seventh-day Adventist church, and the moment you walk in the door, you've got strangers giving you the bro hug, putting an arm around you and smiling and asking about you, and the interactions feel real and genuine. Now, I like to use rationality to decide what things I'm going to believe in, but if I was someone who was persuadable, the Jehovah's Witnesses to me seem to use only control and manipulation, and it all feels false, and they're quite successful at what they do. The Seventh-day Adventists, you walk in that door and you want to be one of them. It really, and the hugging and the genuine displays of caring about each other. It's just an observation. Now I'm wondering I haven't read much about it, but now I want to actually look up some studies on oxytocin and religious groups.
Hugging certainly is. There's evidence, I believe, that hugging and oxytocin is directly related. But if you look at chimps as well, you look at chimps societies, and they are warring like us. They war and they commit acts of murder, of mass murder. Sometimes groups will wipe out a whole other tribe. And that idea that one of the things I found useful, if you're trying to get at what is it that might make hostility to an outgroup, which is kind of where we started this little part of it.
Yeah.
One of the things I think that I've found really useful and really interesting is the work done, talked about a bit by Sapolsky, but by a guy called Will Storr, who's not a biologist, but he's written this book about status and the alliances we form with other humans, and often to increase our own status. And if they looked at it, Diane, who's the wonderful woman who just died recently? Looked at chimpanzees.
Jane Goodall.
Jane Goodall.
Jane Goodall, thank you. Jane Goodall, yeah, and she did a lot of work on status within chimps, and they form alliances the whole time, and these alliances form and then dissipate, and you can get your status, you improve your status often by forming an alliance with another chimp, group of chimps, and then you form an us and them, and then you can get together and push down and take out a high status male, say, for instance, who might be, and this sort of idea of forming alliance and grooming and working on the status of people, we see it all the time in human culture, don't we? Especially in this current world, and then you can then push over and you get your status and you elevate your status. So this drive to improve our status, whether you're male or female, is so deep within us, and I think under acknowledged. And I think unless we
particularly deep for males and primates compared to females, and you're describing really bonding and attachment within a group, not between groups.
This is true.
Yeah. One comment about, you mentioned both Zafir and Chris a moment ago mentioned, hugging and the power of touch and the oxytocin release that likely occurs when that happens. I suppose if you're comfortable with the hugging, or if you don't find it performative and it seems genuine. I think I have read, and I'm gonna this is kind of half-baked the way I'm going to present it, but I believe there's been some research in the importance of simply having a loved one hold a patient's hand during some medical procedures, that it has a pain reduction element to it. And I mean that this is actually peer-reviewed medical journal kind of research, not just somebody thinks this is true. So that just occurred to me a moment ago when you guys were talking about the hugging. But you're right, there is going to be some in-group and out-group within a larger community, not just between a tribe and another tribe, so to speak. Yeah. But I kind of think, Rob, I wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on my answer to the question you raised, which is to think about the out-group hostility more as a byproduct of the in-group bonding rather than as a direct effect of the neurotransmitter.
It strikes me that there should be some sort of threat from the out group, perceived or imagined, but
yeah.
I don't think you would work up a lot of hostility towards another out group if you're in a meeting full of people who make you feel good.
Well, I'm thinking about the hostility that sometimes has occurred historically between religious groups, to go back to that. And now, of course, some of that was, for much of human history, other religious groups would actually attack you violently. But in the modern world, perhaps the threat must be that you're going to convert my flock and make them leave the religion I believe in and convert to your religion. Is that maybe that's the threat that makes some religious groups, I don't know if, again, hostile is the right word.
Religions have always competed and the larger the religion, the more aggressive they sometimes become in trying to proselytize, and that is a threat to other groups. So
it's also that kind of loyalty that you belong to this tribe. And one of the ways you see this within especially male groupings where you say, if you're going to belong to us, if you're going to be attached to us and you're loyal to us, you've got to show your anger towards the other, whoever they are. You've got to prove
virtue signaling.
Yeah, virtue signaling. And then it's a kind of, so I kind of, you see it in British football teams, in football matches, this sort of, if you sat there and I remember once I went to a football match, and I've never really been a football fan, and it was, and I remember I sat there and there was a goal scored and I was sitting in the wrong end. I didn't really care who won, and I stood up, which was a great goal, and the people around me all really had a go at me. I was like, "You're a traitor. Why are you here?" And that kind of struck me that this is the sort of groupishness that we're talking about. There's something here about animosity for the other that has to be shown in order to have group belonging.
Diane?
There are a lot of cultural differences, not only from culture to culture, but from group to group. So some of the things Zafer was talking about, for example, might be interpreted that way. But I wanted to go back to question
Froze
because
again. Yep.
he's specifically talking about oxytocin effects. And can everybody hear me? Because
Yes.
Kathleen told me that last time I talked, you couldn't hear me.
Occasionally you freeze, but right now you're okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, Rob was saying, is it simply that oxytocin makes group members feel closer to each other? Does it really have to induce hostility? And my hypothesis would be that no, it doesn't induce hostility directly, but what it does do is make you more alert to competition coming from outside.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you tighten the boundaries of a group, that makes you more aware of other groups being potential rivals.
And that would fit, Diane, if the oxytocin also, because I become more attached to my group, I'm therefore going to become more protective of them.
Yes,
which is
indeed.
going to make me more worried about
you're
outside.
more alert to it. But in the experiments that were done, groups were put directly into competition.
Mm-hmm.
So the competition was created by the experimenter, not by the oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
But what the oxytocin did was to accentuate the amount of competitiveness of the group that had the oxytocin.
Mm-hmm. But it would make sense that to the degree that oxytocin, to repeat what I said a second ago, to the degree that oxytocin makes me more attached to an individual or to, yeah, you can reframe this in terms of jealousy as well, because that's competition. So the degree to which I'm attached to a person or a group is going to make me both protective and possessive of that group or person. Therefore, I'm going to be more vigilant and more willing perhaps to be to fight against the person or group that I'm protecting. That makes sense to me.
It makes sense, but I don't know of any. There could be, but I don't know of any research that says that oxytocin provokes hostility.
Okay. So we want to make a distinction between being more protective and perhaps competitive versus a need to be hostile or violent towards another group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Scott?
Yeah. Is it possible that we're in this discussion here and a lot of these papers asking oxytocin to or attributing a lot more to it than it is worth? I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifting going on here for something that is apparently state specific and short lived. So anyway, I mean, maybe these behaviors and the relationships are what they are, but the effect that oxytocin has on them, I think, is well, at least highly speculative.
Yeah, that's a valid point. I think it's a artifact of picking that as a topic for discussion to some
it's
degree.
The same as maybe it's the same sort of ground scientifically as we've had for over the decades. There's been genes that have come forward, and people said, "Oh, this is the gene for intelligence," or "This is the gene for," and it's just bunkum. There is no specific gene for these things. It's a very complicated multi-gene, and it's to do with, and it's a whole range of things which are relating to it, and we don't even know, can't really classify what intelligence is at all in the first place. So maybe we're all fascinated in the sort of things we're talking about, whether oxytocin is in the frame very much or just a bit. is perhaps not so important. It's whether we're interested in what's giving rise to and what we can do about
Yeah,
it in the end.
I think that the news in the research was simply that the early research in oxytocin only focused on the attachment and bonding. Um,
Yeah.
at least in how that research made its way into the popular media. And the newer research that Alan was wanting us to think about and point towards was in a way aligned with what Scott is saying. The story's more complicated than that. It also has this effect. Um, but of course we can also oversimplify that and now say, oh, it's just this yin and yang when it as Scott just said, it's state dependent and all of that. But I think that's why this caught Alan's attention, was just to remind us that it's a little more complicated than just making us fall in love. Yeah, Rob?
I'm just wondering now, getting back to the topic of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, my college roommate became a Jehovah's Witness, and I think before I knew about that, I was fairly hostile to the people banging on my door and trying to come in and sell me a free Bible study class. But during the pandemic, I had weekly conversations with my college roommate, uh, sometimes about the Bible, sometimes about Jehovah, sometimes about other things. And it seems to me that when they meet, that's the place where the oxytocin probably, because he's really identified with the brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, my point with Jehovah.
yeah, I'm sorry, but I
Sorry, I
just don't.
was carry on, Rob.
No, I think that I don't think that they're there to feel hostile or even think about other people. I think they're there to feel that brotherhood, that connection with each other. And it seems
Yeah,
very important for him because he had some mental health issues and
yeah,
he seems to need it.
yeah. I actually I've visited quite a few different groups, and I think of cults as existing on a spectrum.
Mhm.
And the the way I think about it is a little bit different from a lot of other people. Is they usually people define cults as a checklist. It's like, has it got a charismatic leader? Do they want to control every aspect of your life? And they check these things off. It's like diagnosis. 5 out of 7 is a cult. I think of it as a spectrum between the demand for certainty, like any form of doubt is stamped out, versus being quite open-minded and allowing you to actually question things. And the other thing is a cost-benefit ratio, like how costly is it to be a member, and how beneficial it is to be a member. The intersection of these two things is how I think about a cult. The Jehovah Witnesses is one of the most controlling groups I've actually visited, and I've actually do occasionally go along to the little Bible studies that they offer. That's been offered to me as well. I don't know if they think they're going to convince me. I'm there to study them, but that's fine. But the Jehovah Witnesses in particular are particularly manipulative and particularly controlling. And when I go to those meetings, it really does feel like manipulation and control. I don't actually see much of what I'm perceiving as genuine emotion, where I quite often do see that in most other religious groups that I visit.
I totally agree with that. I think, in fact, that his belief in the system gives him a lot of control over himself. I mean, he feels safe in
Right.
that environment. So I agree. I think
And interesting to note, I was
sorry,
just going to say, it's interesting to note
interestingly,
that their doctrine, the way they interact, they're particularly hostile to other groups. They think that every other form of religion, all forms of Christianity, everything else that isn't them, Satan's in charge. They are the enemy.
yeah, yeah. But every other religion I've encountered says the same thing. Yeah. Ours is
And
the
they
only
also
true
have
one.
jealousy.
One thing occurs to me as I listened to this, and it popped into my mind that when you mentioned that the Jehovah Witnesses refer to their fellow believers as brothers and sisters. There are two cultural institutions which, well, maybe three, that occur to me that hijack the family words, brother, sister, father, mother, which maybe that's not by coincidence. Maybe that primes some oxytocin release just linguistically. But the two that occur to me are religion and the military.
Yep.
A band of brothers. So in religion, certainly in Christianity, you literally have, the fathers, the mother superior, the brothers, the sisters who are the nuns. In the military, people refer to the brotherhood and well, the mafia does too. It's just interesting that there's a lot of institutions which I want to say hijack family language to increase a sense of belongingness, and maybe that even elicits some oxytocin release. I don't know.
I think that's an interesting angle because you talk about the military. That the idea that when some people obviously talk about and are massively traumatized by war, and most people are massively traumatized, but then people also talk about this incredible feelings of brotherhood, as you described there, and it's some of the most powerful feelings that they have. People bound together under extreme danger against an enemy.
And I've
And
read
it's
interviews
the
with
against the enemy bit that we're kind of
yes,
talking about, isn't it?
and I've read interviews with soldiers that decide to re-enlist when they don't need to, and almost to a person they say my buddies needed me. They don't say I
Yeah,
believe in the cause. I can't abandon my brothers in the field. I need to go
yeah,
back and defend them.
yeah.
Um,
Mm, mm.
Diane, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, we're getting to what I guess is the end, and I wanted to come back to the beginning actually and reiterate the point I was trying to make on high-low in my note on
Hmm.
high-low, which is that we get hold of one of these phenomena. We learn something about, let's say, oxytocin, or we learn something about what mm, mirror neurons can do. These are, or what the face recognition sections of the brain do, these kinds of things. And we immediately try to expand it into understandings that are pretty far from what the research actually shows. We do it by metaphor, by, seeing similarities and generalizing and so forth. But I think it can be misleading. I mean, just as we saw that oxytocin is stimulated in the body by many different kinds of circumstances, and it has a number of different effects depending on what those stimulus situations are. Uh, Same thing is true for mirror neurons. Mirror neurons were the
Hmm.
explanation of about a
Empathy.
dozen things. It turns out that they don't really do most of that stuff. Um, so I think we need to be careful in trying to apply these discoveries, which are so partial and limited usually in the beginning. They just uh, make us think that,
Hmm.
okay, now we've got this solved, and we haven't got it solved because it's very, very, very complex. I mean, all of the examples you're giving can be discussed in terms of some of the things we've discussed in earlier weeks, like ritual. Ritual is key to most of this religious stuff that you're talking about,
Hmm.
for example. Uh, so is as Steve just suggested, the resemblance to, or not the actual resemblance, but the metaphorical
Yes.
extension of the family uh, terminology to
Hmm.
make you feel and behave towards other people as if they were family members and so on.
Hmm.
Uh, we're very creative doing these things.
Yeah, we can
The-
use metaphors and symbols to expand what is, in a sense, probably at base a familial attachment to a group as large as a nation or even all of humanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And,
I'm going to mention, in the interest of time, I want to mention the future schedule, just to see if
Yeah.
we're still on track before people have to sign off. So, what we had decided on was that next month in January, Kathleen was going to lead us in a discussion called Evolutionary Psychology and the Humanities: An Unhappy Marriage, discussing
Question mark.
question mark. Yes, question mark. Discussing some of the experiences she's had in being a professor in the humanities, and interested in evolutionary psychology and the way that has been received. I'm certainly, I'm, as you know, a retired psychologist, and I was a clinician. I wasn't an academic. And I certainly, in applied psychology, there's quite a lot of hostility towards evolutionary psychology. So I've experienced some of that as well. So are you still on for doing that next month, January?
Yeah, two things I wanted to say. One is I welcome people supplying if they want to share material. Most of the material I know of are, lengthy journal articles, analyses by either feminist and evolutionary psychology or David Buss. And I mean, I don't know if that's what people want is in terms of reading material. And I also wanted to say that Diane's cautionary remarks are good to keep in mind um, for what's coming.
Yeah,
So,
for no matter what the topic is. So that's
yeah.
what we'll do in January. And we, people that are not necessarily in the humanities, I think we've all to some degree probably proselytized what evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology has to say, and have run into different forms of resistance to it. And so that would be a broader focus. In February, I'm going to be facilitating a discussion on religious beliefs as a cognitive byproduct, which is going to rely on Harvey Whitehouse's work in what he called wild religion. That's his term. And in March, Rob and possibly Rob's daughter, I don't know where you're
Yeah,
at with that, Rob. We're going to
yeah,
do we're going to do monsters across time and culture, how ancient fears take shape. Is that one still on, Rob?
that's still on.
Okay. And Diane, go ahead.
No, I was just signaling
Oh,
perfect for
yes, I think that would be a great one. I'm not a horror movie fan, but I have family members who are, and it'll help me maybe understand what they like about these sorts of films. And
I
I
think her analysis is more the role, the psychological role or the sociological role of monsters in popular culture. You
okay,
know,
that's
why they are so perennially important,
right.
and how they express fears or desires or
Right. And how they express fears of a particular cultural moment. And so
Are
as
these
those,
are these only
yeah.
monsters, fictional monsters, or people who might be described as monsters,
I think
like
fictional.
Stalin
In
or something?
general, fictional monsters, as I understand it, but
Yeah.
she's going to do most of the talking. So
Okay.
Okay.
And does anyone else have any other, not that you have to jump and commit to anything now, but any other topics? I had mentioned maybe we could do jealousy. I don't think we've done that. Listening to Zafir, I don't know if we could press you into service sometime to want to lead us in a discussion about cults. That might be kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
You know, there's a couple of ideas that I've been sort of playing with that actually knowing that I've got to actually give a presentation might force me to refine them a bit better. So yeah,
Well,
I've got a couple here that might be easy.
it's only a 5 to 7 minute
Yeah.
introduction, and then it's just
Oh,
really
okay. Yeah,
leading a discussion.
maybe put me down to because there's a thing that's often said, which is that the people that fall for cults or get involved in cults are not any more gullible. And I've got a related thought that they actually are more vulnerable, and it's the vulnerabilities to being to false beliefs, false and harmful beliefs. What are the factors involved there? So that's something I wouldn't mind investigating.
Yeah, that sounds, and that's a little bit that's a little bit broader than just cults. If you want to just say vulnerability to false and harmful beliefs, there's lots of people that are not in cults, but they hold.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and of our age, isn't it?
Say that again, Chris.
It's very much of our age
Yeah, yes,
with social media. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I'd love to
Well,
do something on status at some point.
would you like to lead
Yeah,
some?
I'd be happy to do that. Hmm.
Well, what if we put Zafir down for April and you for May? That's
May, yeah.
plenty of time
Okay.
to maybe you want to refine that, narrow the lens a little bit. Status is a
Yeah,
pretty broad
big
topic,
topic.
but and
Hmm.
maybe I'll put down jealousy for June. So this is nice to sort of have half the year already, not having to flounder from month to month for what we're gonna
Let
present.
me throw something out that I won't necessarily want to lead, but
Okay.
what about the impact of technology on child rearing?
Well, we should get Jonathan Haidt here to talk to us because that's
Yeah.
been
Well,
his.
he writes about it every day, so
Yes.
maybe so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's his
Yeah.
thing. But I
Hmm.
mean, but he's focused on one particular type of technology, which is social media. Are you thinking more broadly?
I was thinking more broadly, partly about things like romantic relationships with AI avatars and so forth.
Sarah
Okay.
Hurdy has a talk on robots and child rearing.
Really?
Robots and child rearing?
Yeah, her talk was something like, "Are we still human if we let robots care for our children?" Something like that.
That's
But
quite fascinating. You know, it's funny. I immediately, Diane, when you tossed out the idea of technology, I thought immediately of the amount of time my children, who are now adults, and grandchildren play video games, which were not part of, my childhood in the 1950s. Um, and and yet I've also read some things that talk about the positive benefits that can occur from video game playing, in terms of, um,
probably more cognitive.
yeah, more cognitive than social, probably. Yes, cognitive. At at any rate, interesting broad topic. Yeah.
But it's not just social media, it's also the extent to which, yes, video games, social media, other kinds of things about technology keep children and adolescents from interacting with each other. And
Yeah.
the deprivation of social contact during childhood has got to have serious effects, it seems to me.
Yes, I would think so. Okay.
Well, Nicholas Carr has written on that too, right? The Shallows some years ago. Our brains are being rewired by screens,
Hmm.
Hmm.
especially with kids.
Okay. Well, lots of interesting stuff to talk about, which through the lens of evolutionary science, which is the purpose of this group. So we'll keep plugging along. I'm glad we have some regulars that keep coming. I thought we might have a low turnout today, given it's pretty close to the holidays. But at any rate, everybody have a happy holiday season, and we'll reconvene in January for Kathleen to lead us in a discussion about hostility towards evolutionary psychology.
I hope some people are here. January, a lot of people are go away.
Okay.
Yeah,
Take care,
that should be.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you.
you.